Okay, we're going to talk about point B and access, practice, and apply outcomes. We have several objectives this unit. One is to define instructional outcomes, and then to talk about 3 outcomes that we're going to focus on in this class and text, and then talk about a relationship between information processing theory, which you learned in the last unit, and its relationship with the outcomes that we use in this class. And then we're also going to look at Bloom's taxonomy and talk about when it's a good taxonomy to use. In the previous unit, we looked at cognitive load, and we talked a lot about how images and words together amplify germane load if they're presented simultaneously. And at the same time, if they're not, you actually increase extraneous load because you provide a message that doesn't make sense. The 4 instructional design variables, A, B, C, and D, play a role in helping us increase germane load and reduce extraneous load. The gap that we identify right here is kind of helping us figure out how to reduce extraneous load, because we're figuring out, well, what do they already know? We don't need to talk about these things. We need to really focus on where that gap is. When we look at variable B, we're thinking of the outcomes that we want to help the learner reach. And when we identify those outcomes and they're aligned with this gap here, you are reducing extraneous load and also increasing germane load. Instructional outcomes are statements that describe specific learning goals or objectives. We write outcomes to describe what we want to happen, and our outcome statements describe desired learning behaviors. And we're going to focus on just 3 outcomes because this is an introductory class, and because 90% of the time these 3 outcomes are great and they'll work for you. Access level outcomes involve lower order cognitive processes, including perception and selection of information that you read, you look at. You don't really think a whole lot. You just gain access to information. Practice level outcomes, they involve mid-level cognitive processes, including organization and rehearsal of information with the goal of meaning making. Practice level outcomes are synonymous with finding examples, organizing information, rehearsing, demonstrating, doing, drawing, sketching. Practice level outcomes are simply places in your instruction where you allow the learner a chance to rehearse and to think about what they've just had access to. Apply level outcome, they're involved in integrating information into long-term memory. And they're also called creating, constructing, forming knowledge, evaluating, integrating, and visualizing. The relationship between information processing theory and access, practice, and apply outcomes is fairly direct. Access outcomes are related to sensory information. When we're working with access outcomes, what we want to do is make sure that the learner accesses the most important information and that it's easy to access. Practice outcomes involve the short-term memory, and this includes working memory and organization processes. Practice goals include thinking about information long enough to facilitate remembering it later. Apply level outcomes deal with long-term memory and integration processes. Apply goals include higher order learning activities, including evaluating, creating, constructing, and generating. In this class, we focus on the access, and I have the words facts here, but access, it could be here just as well. We focus on access, practice, and apply. Bloom's taxonomy is the taxonomy that most instructional designers know about and use. And I love Bloom's taxonomy, but in many cases it's actually overkill. And sometimes what it does is it creates an extraneous load for the instructional designer. So as an effort to reduce your extraneous load and increase your germane load, what I want to do is have you look at Bloom's taxonomy in a different way. Bloom's taxonomy organizes knowledge types So these are the types of knowledge here. You have factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, metacognitive knowledge, and you also have levels of learning from simple to complex. So learning is a verb going across the columns, and learning as a noun going down the first column. Bloom's is really useful when you want very specific outcome statements. And notice 6 levels of learning times 4 types of content, and you'll end up with 24 outcome statements. We focus on 3 outcomes. Bloom's focuses on 24. How do our access practice apply outcomes compare to Bloom's taxonomy? They don't totally map. For one thing, I've created a column which is called access. Bloom's taxonomy deals with thinking from a remember level to a create level. But we have an access category, and that's because in the world of the 21st century, there is so much information now that's already available to us that the information itself needs to be designed. And so therefore, we need to have access-related outcomes. The practice covers the remember, understand, and partially the apply columns of Bloom's taxonomy. And then the apply covers apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. And so in this class, we tend to focus more on this end here. We're going to have you having learners create things, construct their understanding, generate charts and posters and stories. So it's a quick unit. The purpose of instructional outcomes is they help us identify our instructional goal and what we want to have happen. And we talked about access, practice, and apply. And these are 3 goals that we have, overall goals. Access, practice, and apply, they map directly to selection, organization, and integration. There are cognitive processes involved in transferring important information to long-term memory.